This is Sarah, and I just want to take a moment to speak to you about this week's sponsor, Favor. Favor Inc. is a statewide family-led nonprofit 501c3 organization that is committed to empowering families as advocates and partners in improving educational and health outcomes for our children. Favor is the Connecticut state organization of the Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health. Favor offers a single place for families with children who have medical, mental, emotional, and behavioral health challenges to find information, assistance, and training. To find out more about Favor, please go to favor-ct.org. We are grateful for our opportunity to work with Favor as a sponsor, and now on to the rest of the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Chronicles. My name is Sarah, and today I have Kim Kresack Wilson. She is a special needs mom with 2 kids on the autism spectrum who have multiple comorbidities, and she's here today to talk about living in the now and advocating for her kiddos. Hi, Kim. How are you doing today?
Hi, Sarah. I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. It's so nice to talk to you again. You have an incredible story to share. Before we get into it, would you like to further introduce yourself to my audience?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Kim Kresack Wilson, and I have 2 kiddos on the autism spectrum disorder. I also self-identify as autistic and am in the process of getting my diagnosis as well. I live in northwestern Ontario in the city of Thunder Bay, right on the shores of Lake Superior. We're pretty isolated here, so resources can be scarce.
That's good. That's a great introduction. So can you tell us, well, first, I know that you have 2 kids on the spectrum and that you're pursuing getting an autism diagnosis for yourself. I'm wondering, before we get into your story, did your kid's diagnosis, is that what made you think that you could be on the spectrum, or have you always thought that you were on the spectrum?
It was a little bit of both. So when I was younger, I was diagnosed with ODD, oppositional defiant disorder. And that really characterized it helped shape my self-thoughts about myself and my identity. As I was getting older, so I was able to keep it together in public. I still am a really big masker, and I'm working on putting those masks down. But home life was hard. I was really lucky to have amazing parents for the times because I'm a 80s baby. So these things were just sort of emerging more. In my city, I was the first kid to be diagnosed with ODD. So the pediatrician and my mom were learning about it hand in hand. They were teaching each other. And then I hit 20 and I really matured and things changed. I didn't have meltdowns as frequently. At the time, we didn't know that those were meltdowns. And I actually started working at a psychology clinic. And I had one of the counselors come to me, and he sort of specialized in autism. So I would talk to him about my son, and then I gave him a little bit of my history. And I just remember him looking at me point blank and just going, "Kim, you're not ODD. Like, you're not ODD. You don't grow out of it." And I was like, no, but like, I'm ODD. Like, believe me. So then Dade was already born at that point, hence why I was talking to my friend, because at the time he was my friend, about him. And things sort of like clicked with Dade, but like not so much. And then I had Sophie. And Sophie is my moderate ASD kid with the PDA profile. If you haven't heard of it, it's a new emerging profile, such as the female profile, the male profile. It's recognized in the UK. Here in Canada, there are a select few that are starting to recognize it. But other than that, there isn't as much recognition or acceptance of this new PDA or this new profile. And basically with Sophie, since the moment she was born, she hasn't had a moment of peace in her body. So as she's growing and turning into a little person, especially when she entered the school system, I was seeing myself in her. And we were finally getting some answers of how we could help Sophie and help her with her struggles. And just going through the internet, coming across, all of a sudden I came across this thing that could finally explain all of these struggles that my child was having. And then it clicked. I actually had a breakdown when Sophie was about 4, I think. And it really clicked of like, oh my God, this is me too. So it gave an answer. And then I guess within the last I've always sort of put the feelers out there and tried to tell like my healthcare workers, my mental health workers, like I would really like to get diagnosed with autism. This was only probably 5 years ago. No one knew where to to direct me. The only question that I really would get was, why is that important to you? But no further. So I found an online autism community and got involved with that and learned from other people. And then I started to personally search for people who in Ontario were diagnosing adult ASD. Got a few names. It's expensive. It's not covered under any of our health insurance here or our government healthcare. So sort of put it on the back burner, and the kids become focused, right? Like I describe our lives as hills and valleys or peaks and valleys. So usually when we're on a peak, I have a little bit of extra to give and I start pursuing it. I'd say in the last month, I discovered a podcast, and they actually suggested somebody that you can access in Canada who is an autistic herself. So I went searching, I sent an email, I have all the things back, and I'm just trying to find the time to put into it, because as we know, it can be a really lengthy process, an intensive process by going through it with like our kids. And yeah, so soon I'm hoping that I can get those tests in and pay, and then I'll have mine as well.
That's awesome. And I really wish you the best of luck with that journey, because that can be really difficult for an adult to, go through your whole life and realize as an adult, there's, I'm different.
Yeah, like I grew up knowing that I was different, but I couldn't ever I couldn't name it. And I was never successful. Like I was the chameleon, right? So like I had different groups of friends. I tried to become them unconsciously, but I was never quite there. So then it gives you that messaging inside that you're not good enough. And through my experience with my daughter, I say it all the time. I'm like, I do not want my kids to get to 40, which is my age, and feel the way that I feel. So that's really what's motivated my advocacy for my kids and for myself.
Yeah. And I can understand that as in a way, as an adult with ADHD, and there are certain things that with my ADHD makes life easier and harder for me. But I want to backtrack a bit and talk about your kiddos. And you had a traumatic birth with both of your kids. So would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So I became pregnant with Dave. Pregnancy, completely normal. I went 10 days overdue. Went into labor, normal. Went to the hospital, started pushing, and nothing happened. And so I pushed for 4 hours actively, and basically they did an emergency C-section because I'm not someone who says that they can't do anything. And at a certain point, I was like, I don't think I can do this. And that raised red flags with my family, that's with like my ex-husband and my mom. And they're like, something's really wrong. She would never say this. So they rushed me into an emergency C-section, and the doctors opened me up and they said, where's the baby? And my ex said, well, it didn't come out the regular way, so he's got to be in there. You better find him. So what happened was a perfect storm of events. We say that he was nosy. So what he did was at the perfect time, happened to flip his head forward, we say, to see where he was going. And he was trying to come out face first. So he ended up getting stuck, and with every contraction getting wedged in my pelvic floor, more and more, but he wasn't showing any signs of distress as they were monitoring him. Every once in a while, he'd decel when they tried to like push my cervix over the crown of his head, which is completely normal care. And they couldn't quite figure it out. All they knew was he didn't like that. So when they went in, what actually happened was, so he flipped his face into what they call soldier's position. And then he flopped and he was lying horizontally in the bottom of my uterus, I guess. With this, it caused, we found out just last year, actually, that he had 2 strokes during birth. Up until last year, we only knew about 1 stroke. And this happened during the delivery process. And so he came out and he was blue and swollen and really like they didn't think he was going to make it. I ended up being on the table with them trying to get DAID out of me and 5 doctors in me to get him out for about 2 hours. So when he came out, they rushed him to the side, started resuscitating him. And then because they weren't necessarily anticipating it so much, the whole team sort of went to DAID. And then me and my ex we were on the table, left on the table. We had a surgeon on the other side of the curtain. I started to code because my body had just been through too much. So they rush my ex out. They quickly bring me back. And then the next thing I remember, I'm in the recovery room and they're sort of standing over me and they're saying, hey, we got a problem. Because we live in a fairly remote, we are a city, but we're still fairly remote. They were like, hey, we're pretty sure he was starved for oxygen for too long. We're going to have to send him to a children's hospital, which is about 18 hours away from us. And you need to prepare to be there for anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months. Now, the type of person I am, in crisis, I am the person you want. I get to work. How do I solve this problem? So I'm in this bed, barely conscious. At the time, I worked for an airline, which has its benefits that you get certain flying privileges. So I'm phoning my work literally 2 hours after I almost died and my baby I haven't seen yet. And said, hey, I still remember the conversation. I still remember Christine picking up the phone and me going, I had the baby. It's not good. Let me talk to Tina. So transfers me to my supervisor, sort of repeat the same thing. And I say, I need to get my ex-husband and my mom on a flight to London, Ontario. They do their magic. They airlift DAID out. My mom so DAID was born at 5/28 on October 28th, 2010. And my ex and my mom were on a flight at 10:30 a.m. out of Thunder Bay. DAID sort of hung around for a little bit longer because there was, I think, a little bit of weather issues because it's a smaller plane. And then they packed him up in an incubator and off they flew and they met Dad and Grandma in London. Because of what happened to me to get DAID out, I ended up with what they call a T-section. So I had incisions as essentially like a hot cross bun. So I had the regular C-section, only it was extended from hip to hip. And then I had an internal incision that went, I don't know how high, in all honesty. I was very lucky. They saved my skin. So I don't have big scars on my stomach, and I kind of appreciate that. Not that it mattered in the moment, but looking back, thank you for that. I was stuck in Thunder Bay for a few days because I was unstable. Finally got to London. They airlifted me out. I came in and I saw DAID. They wheeled me in and I saw DAID, and Andy and my mom had been there for a few days and were really comfortable with DAID. Whereas me, I was a little unsure. In all that time, I'd been wheeled in to see DAID in Thunder Bay. However, his head was turned away from me. And I was still immobile in my bed. And I had only ever touched his toe, his big toe. And so when I came in, my husband was like, I got wheeled in a wheelchair because, again, still not mobile. And he's like, look, he's doing so good. You can touch him, like interact with him. And I remember looking at him and I said, okay, I'm good with the foot. I've only seen the foot. That's where I'm going to start. So spent a little bit of time there. Then I started getting a little bit unstable with my blood pressure. And the comment in the PCI or the PICU, Pediatric Intensive Care Unit, was, we don't take care of big people here. So they really, really were on me I had to take care of myself or else they would lock me out of the ward. So upstairs I went. Unfortunately, I had to stay up there for the rest of the day and night. They couldn't get my blood pressure stabilized. And the next day when I came down, the swelling had come down from his face quite a bit. And that allowed me to start bonding with him. And that bond was quick and strong. And then I started my journey as a special needs parent.
If you don't mind me asking, how is Dade doing now?
Dade is amazing. When we left London, he didn't have any use of one of his arms. It's like it didn't exist. We got right to it. We got into physio. We started doing the deep tissue massage. We started bringing it into his field of vision because something that's super interesting is that with infants, if they don't see it, the body doesn't recognize it. So then it becomes essentially a dead limb. First year he was happy-go-lucky. He loved everybody. He loved going everywhere. At 1, all of a sudden he woke up and he was struggling. Like he just wasn't happy. We started seeing more signs of autism at that point, lining things up. I can't really remember a lot of what sort of flagged autism in our mind. But he was nonverbal up until almost the end of junior kindergarten. And we went through a stage of aggression because he was so frustrated that he couldn't communicate. Now he's 12 years old. He is an old soul, funny, and really you wouldn't know anything happened except for he has a little bit of a different walk and run. And at school, he's quite behind academically. He sits at about a grade 2 level, and he just entered grade 7. But compared to where we started, that's all things that we can handle. He also developed epilepsy, and we're looking at a brain surgery in our future here, but probably within the next 2 years. But he has the most amazing outlook on this and on his life. He's super gung-ho to get this surgery because one of the things that we don't have an answer for is that Dade doesn't have a working short-term memory. So Dade really struggles in things like reading. He still can't really read. And we have been told that this might be seizure related. So once they go in and do the surgery, he'll no longer be considered epileptic, and it could open up access to his short-term memory and be life-changing for him. So although it's scary and risky with any surgery, he handles it with so much grace and maturity. It's amazing to watch.
Yeah, that's wonderful that he's come as far as he's come, because
yes,
that birth outlook just seems so grim.
We were told he wasn't going to make 48 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for him to be, he's 12 now, you
12.
said?
Yeah, turned 12 last 4 days ago.
That's amazing. That's just amazing. And you obviously had to do so much for it. In between then and now, you had another baby with another somewhat traumatic birth.
Yeah, a little bit. So it was really funny not being parents before Dade. We became pregnant again. And I think I kind of jinxed myself. I walked through that pregnancy going, nothing could be worse than Dade. We got this. This is easy. This is going to be our easy kid. The moment I conceived Sophie, I felt like I got hit by a truck. Like, I cannot explain the amount of pain I was in, how exhausted I was. I just really had a hard time living. Everyone goes, oh, second pregnancies. Yeah, that's the thing nobody tells you about second pregnancies. Like, they're a lot more, like, you're a lot more sore, and and really got brushed off as just, this is second pregnancy. In the beginning, Sophie was a twin, and I thought I was miscarrying at about 8 weeks. And then we found out that through that process that, nope, we still have a baby. She's super strong. Well, at that point, we didn't even know she was a she. We just knew the baby was super strong, and a fighter. And so went through, because of the delivery that I had with Dade. Once you have a vertical incision in your uterus, you are unable to deliver naturally. So they went in and they said, hey, like, you got quite the scar there. So we're going to schedule you for a C-section 3 weeks before delivery. Now in Canada, I had always chose to go with midwives. I loved my experience with the midwives. But at a certain point, by law, if you have complications, you have to consult an OB. So I went in for my consult at about, I think, a month before I was due with this baby. And I walked out of there and he's like, okay, I'll see you on Monday. You're having a baby. And I was like, what? Like, I'm sorry, what? Like, I have time. I don't have a crib put together. I don't have anything. I'm not, like, I was kind of in a little bit of denial about, like, we're having a second baby. So got ready really quick, went to the hospital on the Monday. I was really lucky because the OB that I had was the one who was able to get actually Dade out of my body. So he was very aware of the experience we had, and he was determined to give us what he called a good baby experience. So we go in for the C-section. Everything's going great. Sophie comes out. Beautiful baby, healthy, hanging out with us. I didn't realize how much time had gone by. It had been about 2 hours at this point. And I was really lucky. My midwife came off her holidays, actually, to come in and be with us while we delivered Sophie. And I remember looking up at her and I said, what's going on? No real inkling that anything was necessarily wrong. Just something feels not right in the air, but nothing that I could, like, identify. And so I looked up at her and I said something along the lines of, like, hey, like, what's up? And she was like in the back corner sitting on a birthing ball. And she's like, they're doing the best that they can, Kim. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? She's like, they're doing the best that they can. As the midwife is not the one performing the surgery, they cannot convey any information. It has to be to the surgeon, to what he wants to disclose. So all of a sudden this head pops up over that blue screen and he goes, where are you on having more kids? And I said, I'm not, like, I'm done. And he goes, okay, I'm going to try and save your uterus, but I might not be able to. Type of person I was, I that's cool. Do what you got to do. I didn't really have any sort of emotional response to it. I don't tie that to my, like, a being or my identity. I was the person who was honestly never going to have kids. And so I remember then the anesthesiologist pops down and looks at me and she goes, hi, spinal taps aren't really supposed to work this long. And as soon as she said that, I started feeling some things, not pain, just I could feel some things. And I said, yeah, something's going on. And she's like, okay, you're going to sleep now. Good night. And down I went. They again rushed Andy, my ex, out. And then I essentially lost I think half my blood volume, 3/4 of my blood volume. They were unable, every time they went to go close my uterus, it would start, they'd use the term weeping somewhere else. So after I've lost all that blood, eventually they had to make a call. Again, I started sort of slipping away. And they did a partial hysterectomy, closed me up, and put me to recovery. They were calling me sheets in the recovery room because I was as white as the sheets. So I wake up, get brought to my room. I felt amazing compared to what I felt like after having Dade, because my body was really beat up in the process of getting Dade out. I was essentially bruised from my armpits to my hips. So everyone kept on coming in and going, wow, you look like a rock star. How are you feeling? Well, when you're in those conditions, you don't get out of bed. So you don't look in a mirror. So you actually have no idea. So you only have your mind telling you what you look like. So finally I went to the family around. I'm like, why does everyone keep telling me what a rock star I am? And I look amazing. What is this? And then at that point, it was a few days after I'd had the baby. Someone brought me, took a picture of me and then showed me, and my lips were blue. I was very gray. They then gave me some blood transfusions and I bounced back as quickly as you can from that. It takes a while for you're really drained. But then I was home with this baby in the hospital. She slept. We were there for 5 days. The only time she cried was when I tried to nurse her, because we figured out she had a pinched nerve in her jaw. But the picture perfect baby. She loved skin to skin. She loved, she just slept. Okay, cool. Let's go home. The moment we brought her home, everything changed. She was a completely different human being. She cried 20 hours a day, only slept 20 minutes at a time. Nothing soothed her. I had Dade at that point, who was about 2, nonverbal, super aggressive, super frustrating. So he began to take it out on this new noisy thing that came into the house. So it got to the point where I couldn't ever put Sophie down. I couldn't ever leave her alone in a room. I had to have showers with her in the bathroom behind a locked door because Dade would just walk by and essentially punch her in the face. And we just started surviving at that point and looking for answers. Attention was still on Dade at that point, but really we were just trying to help this new baby be okay in this world. And it just sort of grew from there. She grew into her own person, verbal, funny, but big behaviors, big things. We couldn't go anywhere. We couldn't do anything. We became very isolated, and bringing her to anybody who would listen to us and say something's wrong. And then we fast forward to, I think she was 4 or 5. And with Dade, because of the brain injury, that's not classified as a brain injury because it happened during birth, we were getting all our assessments back inconclusive. So they went and did a second autism assessment. And as we're going through it, we're going, does your child do so-and-so? Often, never often, always, those sorts of tests. And we were like, no, Sophie does that. Both of them do that. Oh, that's a Dade thing. No, that's a Sophie thing. By the end, because we were now on our 3rd assessment with the same psychologist, she looked at us and she's like, Kim, I strongly urge you to put her on the screening wait list. Went through and yep, she got her autism diagnosis, more severe than Dade, with some surprising things in there. There was, at the beginning, a learning disability that I just really, I just didn't know. And it was funny because that's what brought me to my knees through the diagnosis process with Sophie, was this learning disability. So insignificant in the weight of the diagnosis that we got, and we were living with my son. Started doing all of the things that you do for autism, early intervention, those sorts of things, even though we weren't very early. And we've always noticed that, like we say, Sophie's never had a moment of peace in her body. So we were seeing anxiety climbing and climbing and climbing. We were seeing her just not be able to be. She didn't interact like her peers. And those behaviors just sort of kept getting bigger as her world grew and entered the school system. And eventually it became a point where it was unsafe for Sophie to continue in public education here. So it required a lot of advocacy, because the way the school system is built here, and I want to be really clear, I love you teachers. I love you support staff. You do a job that is amazing and a job that I can't do. But the system is built in a way that kids like mine, they are very happy to see them sit at home. And for me and Andy, that wasn't an option. Number one, I love Sophie, but it's really hard having her home. It takes a lot of resources and energy, and we still had to work and all these different things that sort of come through. And really, we just wanted her to have, like we said, a moment of peace. So we started, eventually we got down the med road. We still haven't found the right combination for her. I remember going into the psychologist and he goes, well, here's the thing, Kim. Some meds don't work for kids. Like, meds just don't work for some kids. Sorry. And I just looked at him and he goes, and I'm pretty sure she's one of those kids, but we will try the best that we can. And I agree with you. We want to work with you to help Sophie. So we started different combinations, and finally found something that sort of takes the edge off, but we still haven't reached the goal of giving Sophie peace. Then last year, I think it was last year, that we finally had to pull her. She went into crisis. She was trying to put her head through windows at school, put her legs through glass doors. She was already forced down to a modified day of 1 hour a day. Lots of days she wouldn't make it through that 1 hour. And so we were actually at the point that we were sitting on the doorstep of residential inpatient care for a facility in London. We were really lucky. I've developed a crack team. I'm that person that if you do not gel with us anymore, I will be vocal and I will say, unfortunately, nothing personal, you just don't fit us. And the type of kids that I have, I need people that get my kid, that understand them and that love them. And I, over 12 years, have developed our best, we love our team like their family. And we started this process of, which I didn't know existed, of being classified as a complex needs child. And what that essentially does is it bypasses what we have here is the Ontario Autism Program, and that's what funds services for our autistic kiddos here in Ontario. It had been essentially dismantled for about 3 to 4 years at this point. So there was no help for people like kids like mine, because it was in legislation at this point. It was torn down and they were supposedly rebuilding it to be better than ever. And then the team, everything got escalated and escalated and escalated. And then I think it's taken about 7 or 8 months, but she is now classified as complex needs, and the government funds her to go to a ABA facility Monday to Friday, so full time. And she gets up in the morning and she is on me starting at 6 a.m. of leaving. So we start an argument every day, but an excited argument of, let's go to school. Is it time to go to school yet? I want to go to school. And she comes out smiling and she talks about all her teachers there. And she's thriving in the way that Sophie can thrive.
That's amazing. That's amazing. From last year, being in school for an hour, some days, to being excited and looking forward to going to school. I can relate to that part of your journey in a way, not to the extremes. We had situations last year with my oldest son where we were pulling him out for behaviors and him not being able to handle the transition to middle school.
We're doing that right now.
He's now outplaced and he's doing fantastic. Like, he loves school. He can't wait to go. He wasn't feeling well one day and he was like, I don't want to miss guitar lesson today and this lesson. And he's in a classroom with 2 kids. And it's just, we know our kids are smart. Like, even if they have a learning disability, you can be smart and have a learning disability. I have ADHD. I'm not stupid. You know what I mean?
Nope. And that's what is classified, I think. There's still that stigma and we still have a lot of work to do, that we are not less than.
Exactly.
Because we hold a diagnosis. We have struggles that the mainstream neurotypical population don't have, but we are not less than. We are full human beings. We hold careers out there. You would be surprised at the autistics that are probably sitting right next to you at work.
Exactly. Exactly. And sometimes I think that it takes a whole other level of strength to get through a day when your mind is cluttered, or when, you're masking all day, when you're trying to be normal all day.
100%.
It takes a whole other level of strength that you as a child do not have developed till you're an adult. But seeing our kids want to learn is just so great. And even as adults, like, I'm an adult who loves to learn. When I was a child, I hated school because it wasn't structured for kids like me.
100%. Yes.
So, I don't have all the traumas that your family has gone through. Like, my birth with Joey was traumatic-ish, but not to the extent of yours. But there are, I love your story because there's some similarities and some overlap. And I know that advocating for 2 kids on the autism spectrum with special needs and different needs can be really difficult. How do you advocate for both your kids with different needs?
It took a long time for me to realize, and this isn't necessarily a good thing, but I can only fight one fight at a time. So essentially, I can only fight for one child at one time. And I've been really lucky. Mostly the kids' peaks and valleys are opposite to each other. So I only really have one fight to fight, while the other one is doing pretty good. I mean, we still do the daily advocacy and the things that we do to make their life as, but we can only fight one fight. I only have enough energy to put to one war. So it's really interesting. Since Sophie started school, every year I have had to fight and advocate and bring in resources and spend hours researching and reading legislation and reading my rights and my kids' rights in school to fight for Sophie to go to school. Because Sophie's the behavioral one. Dade is very a happy-go-lucky guy, very happy to let other people lead, and he'll put in his input, but he's more passive for sure. And the thing with Dade is the moment you meet him, you fall in love with him. So people are always willing to go that little extra mile. They'll invest in Dade's well-being very easily. So we were in a very small school, and everyone knew Dade. we go around town, and if he sees like teachers, kids from the school, hey, Dade, hi, Dade. Thing with Dade in his memory is that he doesn't really remember people or their names. So it would be like, oh, who's that? He's like, a girl. Okay. How do you know her? I think my school. And we're like, well, that's Emily. And you've been going to school in your class for the last 4 years. And he's like, oh, okay. With this transition to junior high, we're in a whole new school. We're lucky we have one teacher that was at his old school who now is a guidance counselor there, but they have no history of us. They have no history of the battles that I have fought with Sophie. They have no knowledge of what Dade is made up of or his journey. So in his paperwork, it says he has autism. I was just in an IRCP meeting, which is the government level of the IEP meeting, and they knew nothing about Dade. I have not been asked one question about my son. And we are at November, at that point, we were at November 2nd. Well, autism is the thing that least affects Dade. You need to know about his memory issues. You need to know about his huge fear of failure, that he prefers rather to flee than to even give it a chance. You need to know that he's heart-centered and he feels things deeply, and he does not have the best self-worth or self-esteem. You need to be aware of kids like this because you need to pour into them for them to feel valuable. And the school basically was, well, he's autistic, so this is the path he takes. As we know, you've met one autistic. The research and the policies that they're making, they pull from outdated data and outdated research, and research that wasn't contributed to by autistics. That makes a big difference. So my big thing is, like, I get frustrated because I'm like, I'm an adult autistic, or an autistic adult, sorry. I've lived through the school system and how traumatic it can be. And I've even said that about Sophie in a meeting with the school board, of saying, like, Sophie has accumulated a lot of trauma by being in this building and in this system. It doesn't work for her. We all can agree this does not work for her. She cannot be in a classroom. And the special ed coordinator with the board goes to me and goes, trauma? I think we need to be very careful about the words that we choose. And I was like, I can pull out studies. I can pull out data. Yes, the school system is traumatic for children going through it that do not fit your cookie cutter mold. And my kids, my saying is that we live in the gray. We don't check your boxes. We have needs that you have to have a conversation about. You have to get to know us to help us, because we can become amazing people and we can do amazing things in this world. And as I go through this more, I'm getting the desire, the burn, the urge, I don't know what it is, to make change. I'm not willing to let someone feel what I felt and what my children feel, because they're not aware, or they do not want to recognize it and name it as what it is. And so this year I was all excited going into September. I'm like, Sophie's thriving, doing well. She goes to school year round. We're good. Go into September going, this is the first year I'm not going to have to fight, because I haven't had to advocate for Dade for quite a while. He had people around him who understood him and understood if he had a meltdown, there was a big reason why he had a meltdown. And it had to do with usually communication and being understood. So we actually, after the IRCP meeting, I got called by the school because Dade was having a meltdown. Dade hasn't had a meltdown in school in 3 years. He hasn't had a meltdown at home, knock on wood, in I don't know how long, 2 years maybe. So we were like, okay, like, we got to school very quickly, like, what's going on? right after being essentially in battle with the administration, which was very interesting to go in and then like have to put down your armor and like meet your kid, because you don't want to be wearing your armor when your kid is hurting and in distress. We were able to get him calmed down. In the end, I essentially have gone around administration and I'm dealing with his teachers directly. I was able to finally get them to email me, because in junior high here, it's structured like high school. So they have multiple teachers. So this is a whole new system for me that I don't know how to navigate. So I was waiting for some connection and asking through the special ed coordinators for the teachers to reach out to me, because Jade's missed some school this year due to illness and also a hospital stay. And the teachers did reach out and I said, thank you. And we aim to be collaborative. The biggest thing that I can suggest when you're working with schools and teachers, the first things out of my mouth are usually, how can I support you? How can I help you? They're usually very receptive to that, instead of saying, hey, I've got someone that you have to work harder with and put more of your energy and resources into. How can I support you in a system that doesn't support you? Like I said to someone who isn't used to the style that I take, usually the school is the authority and drives the journey of what assessments are done and what basically what happens. And usually within the first week, I'm right face to face with them saying, hey, what can I do? What do you need? What assessment do I have to push for? How do I help you be successful for my kid? And a few have been sort of taken aback by it. And I had a very good relationship with the special ed resource teacher at our elementary school. And she actually would go ahead and be like, these are not parents that you're used to working with. They're there. They want to communicate with you. They want to support you. They will do anything to help their kids succeed. However, they know the system and they know what needs to be done when, and will probably approach you in a way about filling out the Connors assessment or something like that. They're very proactive. And how I explain it is, you spend more time with my kid than I do in a day. They're there for 6 hours. I know what it is to do 4 hours with my kids. So yes, your needs come first in when we're trying to get supports, because this is where he spends the most time. This is where he's the most vulnerable. I have control at home. I control the messages that my kids get. And the messages I send to my kids are that you are amazing. There is nothing wrong with you. It is not a burden to tweak something. Whereas for 6 hours, the system tells them that they are a burden and they are wrong and they need to change and they need to try harder. So I have really strict guidelines and some unorthodox ways. My kids haven't done homework Dave hasn't done homework up until this year, because it takes so much energy for him just to exist for 6 hours in that environment, that he deserves to come home and let it all go. This year, we're approaching it a little bit different. He's older, he's more mature, he can handle more. We've missed quite a bit of school. He's in a hybrid education plan, I guess. So he's in mainstream courses for the 3 morning classes. And then he moves into a transitions class. It's the step between life skills and mainstream. And he's thriving. He's loving it. I'm having a little bit of a hard time adapting to the more independence, but I'm getting there. So that's our goal, is just creating the right place for them, whether it's the typical route or like we've at this point, we've had to say goodbye to public education for my daughter. And I don't know if we'll ever go back. And I'm okay with that, because when I saw my kid walking into school every day, dragging her backpack on the ground and her head hung and no one acknowledging her when she got to the playground, to being excited to wake up, to go somewhere and participate in something. I will say there's quite the controversy about ABA. I think That is all in how involved you are. I went in and I was very clear about what I accept and what I don't. I encourage my kids to STEM. Please do not discourage them from STEMing. However, my kid has to safely be in an environment to live in this world. My kid has to be able to stand in a line to get care. We have to be able to wait in a doctor's office because that's how our medical care system is set up. There are these things, these non-negotiables of living that she needs help with. And that is the way, and she is receptive to their help. So that is where I will go. I am always on the lookout for changes in my kids' mood swing. Like, right, I always have a pulse on that. I know the things that start going a little rough when things aren't great for them. So I'm always sort of on the lookout for that, and we tweak, right? So Sophie, before, like, she has a lot of sensory issues, so she's unable to brush her teeth. She's unable to brush her hair. Washing her hair is like I wash her with acid. But these things sort of have to happen. They don't happen as often as in a neurotypical or what they deem as, I guess, healthy or normal. But they still have to be done for dignity for the person. And like, they could take your kids away at a certain point if they don't understand. And so as long as we see that they are happy, we're good. I think that the sort of, they say the ABA abuse is, that can happen with I've seen it happen with a speech pathologist. It's not necessarily the practices, it's the provider, and you have to have a really good relationship with them and a really transparent relationship of what is okay and what you need, like what that human being needs help with. I think a lot of it is based on old practices of ABA. And like I said, this is the only place that my kid can go for 6 hours a day and be happy and feel like she belongs somewhere and is contributing to herself. So yeah, it's really knowing your child and letting the systems not tell you how it should be. The systems are broken. We all know that in both countries, Canada and the US. Our education systems are broken. Our mental health systems are broken. Our healthcare is broken. So you really have to work it to your advantage and not give up. They're going to tell you that you are wrong. They are going to tell you, we've never done it this way. I don't accept that as an answer anymore. Just because you haven't done it doesn't mean that the way you've been doing it is the right way. Because for people like me, I can tell you from lived experience, it's not the right way. I'm an autistic. Learn from me. I am always here, and I hate the word educate because it sounds like I'm very arrogant or higher than you, and that is not how I want it. I know that the data that you've been given, the research that you've been given is not correct because they didn't consult us. So how could they know what we're feeling and what struggles we experience if they haven't asked and they haven't considered us an equal at their table to contribute to things that will better our life? And that's my big advocacy at this point.
Exactly.
The information you get is broken and your system is broken. And with this experience with my son fighting with the school again, I've had many counseling appointments, therapy appointments, and I've walked in and I'm like, I'm changing the system. I'm doing this. And every time it brings me a little bit closer to like what I feel like I eventually will get to, or my dream, I guess. I want to help hospitals learn why emergency rooms aren't safe for us and our kids. I want the school system to understand that they're broken and there's easy things that necessarily don't cost money that you could do that could change the life of a human being. And so basically I've been on the internet, I've researched, right? I've found This is how you make change. You join the committees, even though I hate that. Brings out my masking to a whole other level. I went to my sister-in-law who was involved in city council, and I said, I'm going to be the next school board trustee because that's where you make change. And that's really driving my passions lately. I feel I have a responsibility for people who are similar to me to not live through the challenges that I've lived through if I can prevent it. And yeah, that's essentially it. For my kids, I kind of had to change. I was in the airline industry for 20 years. Airport life does not work when you have children. My report time to the counter where I checked you in to go on your awesome plane or awesome trips was 3 a.m. My kids haven't consistently slept through the night ever. Between the two of them, I can still be in infant stage 12 years later. That brings down my health resources. I ended up with pneumonia quite frequently. I had an accommodated schedule through the work that I requested, because in Canada, for if you have any Canadian listeners, and they work a corporate or a 9-to-5 job, or for me, a 3 a.m. job to 3 in the afternoon job, we fall under our human rights protections under family status. So if you cannot find care for your kids and your work is giving you a hard time, ask for accommodation, and you have to do this in writing, or else it's like it never happened. Put an accommodation, a request for accommodation to your employer, and legally, you are protected under family rights of family status of Human Rights Code in Canada. I had that battle for many years. And then finally, I followed the news, and it was a case in BC that got ruled on by the Supreme Court that it is discrimination, and they didn't even have a special needs kid. So I got my resources there, and I went to the company, and I basically said, these are my rights, and kind of, I don't want to say force, but I strongly led in what I needed for my kids at the time. So I've made some progress there. And then COVID happened, and I had a call from the school to come pick her up. They were threatening to call the police on her because she was trying to kick them. She wasn't actually kicking them, just apparently trying. And it was the Friday before March break, and I drove away from the school going, what am I going to do? No one can care for her. There are no daycares that will take a 7-year-old, especially with aggression issues. And so what I did was I started researching how I can support myself at home. I came across virtual assisting, and I slowly built my business, and I've upgraded my skills, and I now own a business that I am an online business manager for interior designers. And I work from home, and I'm here for the bad days, and it's super flexible. I let all my clients know right off the bat what sort of my Cliff Notes story is that there are going to be days that I just have to sort of say, I got to go. Sorry, but your work will be done. Right? It's flexible. Some nights I'm up till midnight still working away. But I found something that works for my family and works for my kids, and it's possible. That's something that I want to know. You don't have to go the typical route because typical doesn't fit us. So we need to create a world that we fit in for ourselves. And so I guess that's my biggest thing, is that these things are possible. Reach out. If anyone wants to know, I'm always happy to talk about it and let someone know, because I know what it is to be in that moment and not know how you're going to pay your mortgage or your rent, because there is no one to take your kids and there is no stream of assistance. I'm lucky to live where I live. There are government assistances out there. However, there isn't one that exists for a parent taking care of a disabled child that does not have an imminent death in their future. It just doesn't exist. Well, what do? We know we have kids that we can't be out in the world with sometimes. The world's not built to support people like me. I had an employer tell me because I was missing so much work that people like you just need to quit. Right? So when you hear those things, back then I was not someone who took action. I was like, are you dumb? You can't say things like that to people in Canada. Like, there's protections to workers. Sort of stuck it in my back pocket. I didn't want to rock the boat. Now I say I have no problems rocking the boat, but I don't go in there with an iron fist. I go in there really trying to express my need to want to communicate with them. I want to have a receptive conversation. I want you to hear me, and I want you to see me as an individual, not as a problem. And I feel like we still have a lot of work to do in that area. And I think I will always work towards that, whether it's in an official capacity and find somewhere that fosters that, or just in meeting Joe Blow on the street, right? I'm always willing to have that conversation. I always encourage anybody to ask questions. Asking questions isn't offensive, or I'm always thrilled that you want to learn from us. And that's what my aim to do is always, please learn from us. There's so much that you can learn from us.
Yes.
I guess.
Your advocacy, like, I'm hearing that your advocacy is for your kids, but also for yourself and your career and other people in your career. And I want to just touch back on, I was going to ask you how, raising your children affected your career, because that's something that so many parents of kids with special needs, just special needs in general. I don't even want to say just autistic kids. Kids with special needs. People don't ask, how does this affect your career? And a lot of times there's almost no support.
There is no support.
Possible to get it. In the United States, it's even harder. There's less. We don't have protections.
No. And that's why I say I'm super lucky where I live. It's a hard place, because even with the protections that I have, I would have to leave work and leave my coworkers shorthanded. We check in flights. There's a time limit on that, right? 3 people checking in 200 people is a lot different than 2 people checking in 100 people. So there was a lot of, I don't want to say animosity, because there was a lot of understanding. They walked through this with me. I was at the airport when Dade was born. Everyone was very aware of what happened. Our airport's like a whole living organism. People know things about you before you even know them. We always joke. So my relationships with my coworkers were really strained, even though on a personal level they got it, but like it sucks working shorthanded in a high stress situation. I've had to walk away from roles that I really enjoyed. It's hard. I don't know what the right answer there is. I've tried a modified schedule where someone essentially shadowed me all day. So they were the body when I had to run out. That became an issue because people felt like they weren't carrying their weight. Me and this other person were slacking it. So there's a lot of intricacies there that need to be unpacked. And I don't know what the answers are for that.
Yeah. And that can look different for every individual, every family, every career section.
But I'm there for the conversation.
There are no right answers.
No.
But what you're doing for advocacy for special needs families and for yourself is just, it's amazing. It really is. And I applaud you. And I'm so grateful to have you on as a guest.
Thanks. One more thing that I just really wanted to add. Find your community, guys. You don't have to go through this alone. There are people out there that are walking the exact same path as you. There isn't much of a community here in Thunder Bay, unfortunately. I found my community online. I have some of my best friends in a support group, I guess, that are living things that are similar to me, things that I don't experience at all. And we Zoom and we're there for each other and we text. And for me particular, if you're interested, That is Kate Swenson's community with Finding Cooper's Voice. She has a supporters where we talk about everything and anything. We talk about the hard, because that's what I found when I was in my darkest moments with Sophie. Nobody's talking about the hard. Nobody except for Kate. Kate was talking about the hard, and she essentially saved my life.
And that hard is just taboo in itself to discuss.
Right? How do you talk about your kid beating you up? How do you talk about the fact that you're in an abusive relationship, but it's your child? Think about all the feelings that are attached to that and how much shame is attached to those thoughts and realities. Create a community. I'm in the process of creating a community through a group because I noticed there wasn't an online community in Thunder Bay. There was groups, but not a lot of conversation happening in there, not a lot of resource sharing. Just was sort of like, hey, right? Like just random. And that's, I feel like you really don't get the benefits when you don't find your community. And in your community, you will find these surprising heroes and these resources of people who have lived these paths that even your clinicians don't know about. Even like this complex needs classification. I was going to a treatment center because Dade was very aggressive and he was getting bigger and he hurt me. Sophie doesn't hurt me because she's chaos. So she's fists and legs, but not thought out. It's just all chaos. So it's very easy to bat away, sidestep. Dade was always very precise and knew where your body's weaknesses were and took advantage of that. And I would go in and I'd say, hey, like, what am I going to do? He's getting bigger. He's so strong. And they're like, Kim, hopefully he grows out of it. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? Like, there's not therapy. There's not a program. There's not help. And like, it's all said with this like same look in the eye and the same tone as like when I was in the hospital and they were telling me that he probably wouldn't make 48 hours. Hopefully he grows out of it, Kim. Well, thankfully he kind of did. However, at that time, I didn't know what Sophie was coming down the pipes with. She will struggle with this, I think, for the rest of her life. She will struggle, but we will be there and we're creating a future for them. Our future, like our plans are to buy property and have like a main house for me and Adam and my spouse. And we want to build 2 smaller core floor homes not next to us, but like on the property. And those will be they will know from the moment that they're born, those are yours. Dave's like sticking close to home. He likes the comforts. He likes being understood. He's not going far, even though he probably has the ability in the future to live independently. Sophie, however, she, I think, has more of a need that will have to be home with us forever and care forever. But she has that drive and that burning fight for independence, as I did. So I see her going out and trying. But when it doesn't work out, she will have somewhere safe and loving to come home to. And it won't be won't be put into the focus that you failed. And at the same time, they can come home and it won't be a complete disruption to our lives, right? It gives them their independence. It gives us our independence and also sets it up in a way that they always have the ability to try something they want to, but there will be a safe place for them to land if it doesn't work out, because there wasn't really a safe place for me to land when I was in my 20s and trying to do it independently. My parents were amazing, but we didn't work well in a house together. So those are the things that we're looking for in the future and we're building towards, and we'll see, right? That's all I can do.
Exactly. I think you're doing a phenomenal job. And again, I think that you're just a phenomenal person with an incredible story. So my second to last question for you is, what is your favorite self-care technique?
Okay, so this is going to be this isn't going to sound self-care, but this is self-care through and through. Therapy. Therapy is my self-care. I get to go in and it's, again, more information, but Find a therapist that you click with. Find a therapist that understands you. Find a therapist that you trust to go to the hard places to say the things that you would never, ever say out loud, because you need to say those things out loud, because you need to let them go, to grow and to be the people that you need to be for your kids in the future. It's hard work. It's scary sometimes, but I can honestly say anyone that I've spoken with that has gone through therapy or counseling, however you want to sort of put it, no one ever regrets it, right? There's a lot of fear going into it because it's an unknown. You're going to be vulnerable. And let me tell you, as a PDA person, vulnerability is a big thing for me to do. I struggle with it even with be vulnerable with my spouse. And I've been best friends with my partner since I was 15 years old. He's been my person. He's walked through the darkest of times with me. And yet I still have to practice that and tell myself that it's safe to do it. You will learn so much about yourself in therapy. And it just feels good after you've done it. And that's my self-care, because the way my life goes, unfortunately, I'm usually the last in line to get needs met. I try hard for it not to be that way, but that is the reality, and I can only try to get better at it. But my mental health is my sole priority, not my sole priority, but is one of my top priorities, because I have gone through a mental breakdown and I never want to feel that again. So give me all the tools, give me all the resources. I will be vulnerable. I will cry. I will sob sometimes. But
Yes.
all that hurts me inside. Once it's out, it can't hurt you anymore.
Yeah.
And it makes me stronger to fight for my kids.
Agreed. And I agree with you 100% that therapy is self-care. Counseling is definitely self-care. And my final question for you is, if my audience would like more information or to follow your journey, where can they find you?
So if you want, you can reach out to me through my website that's not related. It's for my OBM and VA business, which is KKW Online Solutions. I'm on Facebook. Send me a message, Kim Kresack Wilson. If you want, join my group that I'm just starting. There isn't much activity in it. I'm trying, and that's Life in the Gray. I think I might start a blog. Let me know. Let me know what you want to see. I'm feeling a drive and a need and a passion to put my experiences out there. So tell me what you want to see, and I will try. Or you can email me. My email address is kkresack, so KKRESACK @gmail.com. I'm an open book. If you are stuck in a hard place, I will come and sit in that hole with you. I've been there. Let me help you. Not help you, but let me sit with you in that.
Well, that sitting with someone sometimes is a lot of help and support. So
that for me makes the difference. Someone's willing to sit in the dark and the hard with me. Let's go. We could tackle anything.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Kim, for being here.
No, thank you, Sarah, for this opportunity.
Thank you. You have an just incredible story, and you have so much strength as a human in everything that you're going through. And I'm just grateful to have had the opportunity to speak with you.
Well, thank you. As I'm working in therapy, I will just say thank you.
With that will wrap up this week's episode of Caregiver Chronicles. I will link Kim's information in the show notes for anybody who is interested in reaching out. Also, if you want to support our podcast, we have Buy Me a Coffee or Ko-Fi. The links are in the description. But the best way to really support our podcast is to like, share, and subscribe. If this episode resonates with you, or you know someone who needs to hear Kim's story, please share it with them. That's the best way to, get Kim's story out there and to support Caregiver Chronicles. Again, I want to thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.